You know antivirus, you know anti-spam. These are technologies on which billions are spent each year to ensure the safety and security of the users, customers, and data they protect. But now consider something new, anti-evasion. This new field, like antivirus and anti-spam, is as important and threatening to network security, perhaps even more. Join me now as we discuss how we discovered this threat, what this threat is, the possible implications that it has, and what we can do together as an industry to combat it. Based on some recent third-party testing in which StoneSoft participated, engineers in Stone Lab were going back to see if they could re-engineer how we were doing our testing methodologies. This re-engineering effort led them to realize that we needed an entirely new set of tools that would help us better test the IPS to produce something that was truly effective. What we realized in the process of doing this testing is that methodologies and assumptions that are used today are very rigid. And what we need to do was come up with something that totally broke all the rules. We tried to think like a hacker would think. Hackers don't behave according to rules, so why should we in the course of doing our testing? And that led us to a unique discovery. So at first, when our engineers made the discovery, they thought it was an interesting thing. They thought that it was interesting that by abandoning some of the rules by which packets are created and being able to craft your own custom packet, that you can take an attack, any attack you want, put it in this evasion technique, and send it right through any IPS or any firewall using deep inspection. Now, of course, this requires that there is a vulnerable system on the other end, as with any attack, but it is an undetectable delivery mechanism, which is the important part. Now, what's very interesting about this is that we are probably not the only ones who discovered this. The technology for this is well within the means of any well-motivated criminal organization, and it could explain some of the mysterious security breaches that have occurred over the course of the last several years. Knowing what we have discovered, it is highly probable that the vast majority of computer networks are vulnerable to this new type of threat. All of the things that we have, as an industry, been working on securing over the course of the last few years, credit card numbers, bank accounts, anything of that nature, is now all potentially vulnerable again. Anyone could be a victim. You could be a victim now. Who knows? Now, let's talk about what an evasion is. An evasion is just a delivery mechanism. It can be thought of as a stealth submarine or a stealth fighter. By itself, it's harmless, but when you put something in it, it's really, really bad. It's a way of getting an attack into a network. Hackers use evasions to camouflage an attack in such a way that it confuses or confounds your security device so that it can deliver this malicious payload into your network. Now, of course, there must be a vulnerable system on the other end, but it is a way of getting that attack into the network. If it's undetected, if your delivery mechanism is undetected, then you can start delivering any malicious payload you want until you find a potentially vulnerable server. 90% of security devices today provide very, very good protection against known evasions. However, what StoneSoft has discovered is a new type of evasion technique called advanced evasion techniques. Now, these advanced evasion techniques do not behave according to any of the standard rules that we are all accustomed to in the security industry. Everything that's out there right now is traditional, it's well known, and most vendors protect against everything very, very well. What does this mean? Well, this means that if an advanced evasion technique hits your network, then your protection level is probably pretty close to zero. So that means it doesn't matter what type of security appliance you have or anything of that nature, your protection level is probably pretty minimal. So the main problems with them is that unlike traditional evasion techniques, which are structured, they are very well known and very well documented and not particularly creative. On the other hand, advanced evasion techniques are completely unknown. They can be totally randomized, and you can get very, very creative. Having a custom set of tools that don't behave according to known standards and methodologies allows you to come up with something truly unique. If we can all agree on one thing, it's that hackers are very, very creative, and they are very, very motivated. So that means that they're going to come up with something that is going to sail right through your existing security device using a similar technique. In the hands of a very creative person with the right tools, the number of attacks that could be generated using advanced evasion techniques is virtually limitless. Means that you have a huge, huge, huge number of ways to sneak an attack into a network. If the IPS, let's say, catches one, then there's another one right behind it to follow it up. You can knock at the door as many times as you want, undetected, until you get an answer if there's a vulnerable system on the other end listening. So today, based on some calculations that we have done with the research that Stone Lab has performed, we estimate that it is 2 to the n possible attacks. Right now, the number n stands at 10, so that's 2 to the 10th power of attacks. Get out your calculator, do the math. That is a lot of different ways to try to sneak an attack into a network. But that number is growing every day, and as I said, in the hands of the right person, that number could be virtually infinite. There are a lot of risks involved. We have a situation where you can take old attacks that people may not even be patching for anymore. So there are costs now that will be incurred for making sure that your network is well patched, that you know where your data lives. You've got to know where that data lives now and know how to adequately protect things. So there are many, many risks that have sort of fallen off the radar in recent years that are now sort of at the forefront of security again, because there's a way to get things past an IPS. It's not traditional evasion. This is advanced evasion. This is something completely new. So, can we strike back? The answer is a resounding yes, but it's going to require a change in thinking. Over the course of the last several years, because of some of the amazing security solutions out there, some of our bedrock network design principles have fallen by the wayside. We need to have a shift in the thinking to go back to some of our bedrock security principles to make sure that we are addressing absolutely everything. A dynamic world needs a dynamic security solution. So advanced evasion techniques at this point have certainly made the world a lot more dynamic. So we need something that is more automated and, most importantly, centrally managed. Real central management. Can you update your entire infrastructure from anywhere in the world at a moment's notice? You need in the future to consider the possibility of a solution with anti-evasion capabilities. StoneSoft has been working very, very hard to predict some of the combinations and permutations out there, but we are also in the process of researching good, effective, automated mechanisms for preventing them. So in the future, you want to ask yourself the question, is my solution anti-evasion ready? One thing to consider is that you need a solution that is quickly updatable, something that is as close to dynamic as the threat itself. So software-based solutions, things that can be updated on the fly from the push of a button anywhere in the world, are one thing you might want to keep in mind. Some of the thinking around this is still evolving, but there is no doubt that the most fluid, the most dynamic, the most updatable solutions are the ones that we're going to recommend going forward. One of the things that you can do immediately is to know where everything lives. I know that may sound like a simple concept, but know where it is. Know where your critical assets are. Know what you've got. That's the biggest thing, is knowing what you have on your network. Because if some of this complacency that has set in over the last several years has affected you, then it could be that you may have servers that haven't been as religiously patched as they should have been. So you want to make sure you know where those are. You want to protect those assets with anti-evasion ready solutions. Things that have the capability to have their anti-evasion mechanisms updated as those updates become available. So, one thing, unfortunately, you may have to do with certain servers that are particularly old and perhaps unsupported, you may have to disconnect those, unfortunately. Reason being, anti-evasion techniques allow you to recycle attacks. So, things that every IPS on Earth today have a signature for, well, if you can slip those right past an IPS without being detected or a firewall with deep inspection, then those attacks become problems again. If that OS is unsupported and you can't get the patch, unfortunately you may have to disconnect it. It will reduce your risk of a compromise that might otherwise have been avoided. So long-term things that you can do is to make sure you have a centrally managed solution, as I mentioned a minute ago. I cannot stress the importance of that enough. One thing you have to keep in mind is that to address a threat like this that is as dynamic as it is, it requires that you have actual real agility. Going around and touching a million separate devices, you need something that allows you to touch all of those devices from one place, anywhere in the world, anytime you need to, and update them all at once. That is a workable, sustainable, maintainable solution to deal with this threat. Remote updates are a way of pushing an update to these devices from one place. You need something that will provide you some level of guarantee that the update is going to work, and maybe even some way to test these updates. So this is something else to keep in mind in future purchasing decisions. Dynamic solutions is a thing that even StoneSoft, StoneLab engineers are considering. What constitutes a dynamic solution? Where will the industry go when thinking about what a dynamic solution actually is? Well, what we can say for sure is that this will most certainly evolve into something like anti-evasion patches. So anti-evasion patches are things that can be actually added, pieces of code that can be actually attached to the IPS that give it greater capabilities to deal with these advanced evasion techniques. So, what can we do to finally get a grip on this problem? And that's that you can join the force with StoneSoft. The threat is beyond the resources of any one organization to effectively handle. We need allies. So why join StoneSoft in the fight against anti-evasion techniques? Well, as the discoverer of them, we have a great deal of information amassed, and we are working heavily to continue researching them and what the future of anti-evasion techniques is going to be. We are also working with many other research organizations already to get their input and information on what we should do and what the rest of the industry should do going forward. We believe in responsible disclosure. Anything that we find, any new novel way to penetrate a network, we're going to share with the security community as a whole. Also consider that StoneSoft has a line of anti-evasion ready appliances to address this threat. If you would like to know more or join the anti-evasion force, go to www.antievasion.com. Thank you very much for your attention today, and I'm Matthew McKinley.